Beginning with the end in mind, today we're going to be making a textured scarecrow. The art element of texture, something that's smooth, rough, hard, soft, woven, bumpy or lumpy, jagged, or a little bit rough as well. These are all words that remind you of texture. So today I want to go ahead and get started making the clothing for our scarecrow. Choose a background colored piece of paper. When you're choosing your shirt, please don't choose the same color as your background. Choose a different color, something that's going to show up. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this purple or maroon kind of paper. I want you to go ahead and start drawing a rainbow line or a curved line that goes all the way from one side of the paper to the other side of the paper. Once you've drawn that curved line, go ahead and cut it out. As you're cutting on that curved line, save some of the scraps. We can use that later for our nose. Now, once you go ahead and get the clothes or the shirt for your scarecrow, take a glue stick and I want you to go ahead and glue that down. With my glue stick, I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on the outside or edges of my shirt. Sticking that down into my background paper. And then I always put the lid back on my glue, number one, so I don't lose it, and number two, so my glue doesn't dry out. Once I've drawn and glued down my shirt, I'm taking a look at that line or textures that I can make with my project, and I'm starting to think about what kinds of textures I might try to draw onto my shirt. This bumpy line starts to remind me of a bumpy texture. Yes, as I start to continue drawing on some of those bumpy lines, hopefully it reminds you of a really cool texture that it might turn out to look like. Some people might even call it scaly or bumpy. Whatever you want to call it, it sure is making my project more interesting to look at. Go ahead and fill up the shirt with that type of texture that you want to put on. Any kind of line or design can make it look like a texture. Now, once I finish putting my texture onto my shirt, I want you to go ahead and grab some other supplies to continue working on textures for your scarecrow. When you get a triangular piece of paper, instead of gluing that down for the scarf of your scarecrow, go ahead and tear the edges of the paper. Small little tears work best for this part. Yeah, you don't want to throw away a lot of your construction paper. Just give it a rough or jagged edge to your scarf for the scarecrow. It already has a texture. Now, as I glue that down and stick that down onto my shirt, it's becoming more interesting with different colors put on too. I'll go ahead and start making the head to my scarecrow. You'll find some manila or yellow drawing paper and an oval. As you take the oval and the manila or cream colored paper, you're going to draw the oval onto that cream colored paper for the scarecrow face. As I put that pattern down onto the paper, it barely fits on. Go ahead and trace around that oval shape and then cut that out. Something I forgot to mention. Also, that triangular piece of paper, I'm going back to that texture idea. I'm going to try to make a woven or hard texture put onto my scarf. Remember, this is a textured scarecrow, so I want to put on as many different textures onto this project that I can. So it starts to look woven already by drawing some diagonal lines onto my torn or jagged scarf. Now, that I have the head, the scarf, and the shirt put onto my scarecrow. Remember how I told you to save your scrap? That scrap can be used to make a triangular nose. Go ahead and glue that down as well. Now, you can do this at any time. Once you've got a great start, you can make any kind of face that you'd like for your scarecrow. These are little stitch marks. It looks like it's been sewn on to the face of my scarecrow. Now, let's go ahead and start making a textured hat. When you make your textured hat, take a few textured pieces of plastic, or as you can see right here, this is a textured plate. These are crayons that don't have any wrappers on them. So when you take your crayons out of this bag, we are going to be using the sides of the crayon. Place your texture under your white piece of paper. Let's get a little closer so you can see. When you take your crayon, drag it across the textures. Hold your paper and your textured paper together really tightly with one hand, while the other hand is dragging the crayon on top of the texture. Both hands are going to be used. One hand holds it while the other hand drags the crayon on top. Try using different colors. The first color I used was blue, and now I'm using some pink. You can use whatever color that you want to make your texture show up. The more colors you use, the more bright and colorful that your hat will become for your scarecrow. Now, once I've finished with this texture, I'm going to try a new texture on the other half of the white paper. Now that I've got a new texture, try some of the same colors or maybe some new colors. But what we're not doing is we are not rolling the crayon. Hold your crayon and don't color like you normally color using the tip. Your colors are going to be a little bit too dark, or it might not show up the texture. So use the side of the crayon to make those textures show up on that paper. Again, once I'm done with one color, placing the texture on, do the same with another color. Now that my paper has lots of different colors and lots of different textures on that half sheet of white paper, I'm going to go ahead and take a pattern that has a hat. It looks like a hat pattern. When I take my hat pattern, I'm going to go ahead and trace around the hat shape. There. Now that I've got my hat pattern with all those really cool textures put on, I'll use this to glue on top of my scarecrow. Okay, so here's some textured paper. I'll go ahead and adjust my camera. And I'll take my glue stick again and glue the hat down onto my textured scarecrow. Look at all those cool textures. Some of them have wavy lines, and some of them look bumpy, and some of them might look scaly. This is a great hat for my scarecrow. Once I've glued the hat onto my scarecrow, now I'm again taking a look at that end in mind. I can add some hair onto my project, maybe some tissue paper, some black lines, a feather, a button, or maybe even some tissue paper that could look like a patch. As I look at my finished example, I can start to add on little stitch marks or any kind of added texture or add-on that I desire. So, let's take a look. Using my oil pastel, I'm going to decorate my hat any way that I want for a little bit more added interest. I'll go ahead and take my oil pastel too and add some stitch marks going around my hat. It just seems to make that hat pop out and stand out a little bit more. These are some things that you can add to your textured scarecrow as you continue. Maybe some hair, some buttons, some tissue paper, feathers. I hope you have fun.